Good afternoon. Welcome to the second webinar of Feeding Knowledge Project. My name is Laura Scivetti. I work in the project team in the organization of the webinars. Before introducing the speakers, I give the floor to the director of Mediterranean Agronomic Institute of Bari, Dr. Cosimo Lacirignola, for a short presentation of the main features of the project.
First of all, I would like to thank you for attending this webinar and for the interest you have shown in Feeding Knowledge Project, which is highly appreciated. Technology and innovation that have shown their positive impact in the Mediterranean region give us the opportunity to communicate and work together from different countries building networks and bridges. This is the best representation of the spirit of our organization, semi-arid, that, as many of you probably know, has been working hard for the last 50 years to support education, share knowledge and promote cooperation on issues related to agro-food sector in order to address one big challenge, ensuring nutrition while coping with scarcity of resources. This is also in line with the spirit of Feeding Knowledge, a project that has been developed with the Polytechnic of Milan in the framework of the 2015 Milan Universal Exposition, whose theme is Feeding the Planet, Energy for Life. The project is based on the idea that knowledge development is the best way to identify concrete solutions for food security that really meet the needs of countries. The cycle of webinars, which is the very first activity of the project, and all Feeding Knowledge activities are developed through 5 research and innovation priorities. The first is sustainable natural resource management, the second is quantitative and qualitative enhancement of crop production, the third is socio-economic dynamics in global market, the fourth is sustainable development of small rural communities and marginal areas, the fifth is food consumption patterns, diet, environment, society, economy and health. The main objective of the project is to create opportunities for dialogue and development through a Mediterranean network of experts focused on research, innovation and transfer of knowledge on food security. The network, open to all researchers and academicians of the region, will work on the identification of best solutions for food security, mainly through the release of white papers focusing on the 5 research priorities. The paper will be developed through e-collaboration among all members of the network. In the drafting of such paper, the network will start from the analysis of needs and problems of Mediterranean countries related to food security. Thanks to these papers, the network will be able to support policymakers in the elaboration of programs and policies to enhance food security and to stimulate a constructive dialogue among Mediterranean institutions. National Extension Service of Mediterranean countries will be involved in Feeding Knowledge in order to ensure the identification of farmer and stakeholder needs to be addressed by the scientific community and to support the transfer of knowledge and solutions. Given the strong collaborative character of Feeding Knowledge, I would like to highlight that this project represents a unique opportunity for researchers and scientists to consolidate their knowledge and enlarge their personal network of contacts to develop new collaboration. Of course, technology will help us achieving this objective. In fact, the network operates through an international technology platform, useful to share our ideas, information, research and news in order to develop new synergies. Before giving the floor to the speakers, let me underline another important activity of Feeding Knowledge that might be of interest of your organization, university and institutions. Our project is supporting the recognition, evaluation, dissemination of best sustainable development practices of food security, a competition that will be launched in March 2013 within the frame of Expo Milan. The call is addressed to policies, technologies, know-how, services and products related to the theme of the Expo. Initiative recognized as best practices will be invited to have an exhibition space during the expositions. Well, it's now time to start the webinar. Thank you again for attending this event Join Feeding Knowledge Network to share your ideas on food security.
Thank you, Dr. Lacirignola, for your presentation. The first part of today's webinar will be held by Professor Pandi Zdruli. The title of his speech is Natural Resources Management, Climate Change, and the Relationship to Food Security in the Mediterranean. Professor Pandi Zdruli has been with IAMB since 1999. Previously, he worked for European Commission Joint Research Center in Ispra, Italy, USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service in Washington, D.C., and the Soil Science Institute of Tirana, his native Albania. His scientific interests include soil science, land degradation desertification, natural resources management, environmental impact assessment, and integrated coastal zone management. He has published many papers and is editor-in-chief of 12 books and proceedings and member of many national and international organizations in the world. Following the two speeches, the question time is foreseen. Please write your question in the chat box that will appear on the right at the bottom of the screen. The speaker will answer after the speeches. Thank you, Professor Pandi. The floor is yours.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Laura, and thanks to all of you who are following us. A couple of things before I start. Dealing with nature resource management, climate change, and relationship to food security in the Mediterranean obviously is an enormous task, and 30 minutes are never enough. Secondly, we are also developing a white paper, so I will invite all of you to follow us in the development and while we work on that, so please feel free to add and to provide your comments on that. The topics of my discussion will include the issues related to land, the issues related to water, and I recognize here the inputs provided by Nicola Lamaddalena and Alessandra Sgardino, climate change, inputs from Mladen Todorovic, biodiversity, Jenny Calabrese, energy nexus with inputs from Vincenzo Verrastro. All of us, we are staff of the Mediterranean Agronomic Institute here in Bari, and I do recognize also the inputs provided by Professor Coppola, Antonio Coppola, at the University of Basilicata here in Italy. The Mediterranean is a quite unique place. It's a place where three continents meet together, and rarely anywhere else this happens. There are 22 countries that border the sea with very distinct features from north to south, being those economical, biophysical, cultural, and so on, but we share the same sea. And when you talk about issues related to food, in the northern Mediterranean countries, the major issue is food safety and waste of food. We do waste a lot of food in the north, while in the MENA countries, and I make a parenthesis here when I talk about MENA, I recognize the countries from Morocco all the way to Turkey, so North Africa and the Middle East, not the Gulf countries, and neither any other country that it is not included here. We do include Jordan, as a matter of fact, no matter it does not have a link direct to the Mediterranean Sea. So food security in Africa and the Middle East, and you can see also how the differences in between the GDP per capita are different between one part of the Mediterranean to the other. FAO has developed this map that shows the prevalence of undernourishment of the total population. Here again, it is very distinct, for example, that the northern part of the world, with the exception of Australia, is not dealing with issues of undernourishment, and then we go to the south, the picture is rather different. Again, in the Mediterranean, we do notice also these differences, and even though the level of malnutrition is not as high as it could be in central part of Africa, for example, with the exception of Iraq, even though it's not included in my analysis. So I will invite anyone to log in, and this is quite an interesting web page. Let's talk to land resources. So the Mediterranean availability of agricultural land is rather limited. Overall, we have something like 14% of our land that is fitted for agriculture use, and if you go to the MENA region, that drops to 5, or out of 854 million hectares of total land, only 180 million are suitable for farming. And then we have a large extension that covers something like 63%. We consider that on purpose as other, meaning that this large area of something like 538 million hectares has limited biomass potential, or are areas that are sealed or are urbanized. And that is a big issue, and I will come back to that. And we do have also about 1 million hectares of wetlands, mostly on the coast. Other than that, the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, or the UNCCD, has this definition of the drylands, following the aridity index. And in the northern Mediterranean countries, that range go about 33.4%. Largest part of that is in Spain. And while in the MENA region, that is double, so 61.3%, then be sure that we're talking about drylands and not hyper-arid areas, which also cover large extension. And in that regard, the Mediterranean is also quite unique, because there are 4 annexes of the UNCCD that come together in one single region. And then, if I would like to give in a more let's say, precise way what we were talking about, limitation of land, northern Mediterranean countries are a little bit better placed in the availability of agricultural land. But when we go to MENA, that it is very different scenario. Egypt has something like less than 5% of its land fit for agriculture, less than 2% in Libya, 3 to 4 in Algeria, and so on. Maybe Turkey a little bit better. So distinct differences between less land, and we go back to water as well, and too many people. So the scenarios of food security as far as agricultural production are related. It's a little bit complicated. And on the other side, we're not in the tropics here, so slash and burn, for example, is not an option. Agricultural land is a finite resource, and expanding cultivation, probably through terracing, as it happens sometime in Syria, or expanding cultivation in dry areas, it is an issue also of water availability, and that is also shortcoming. I'm a soil scientist, so I thought maybe to spare just a few words also about soil diversity in the Mediterranean, even though we all know that there is a difference, there's not the same land and soil, and much of my analysis deal with land, but this just a very graphical picture of the diversity of the soils. This picture on the top, it shows a very fertile soil. We call them Farzem or Castanozems in WRB classification, or mollisals of soil taxonomy. Very, very productive soils, but they are limited. And then you have the so-called famous Terra Rossa soils, as you can see in Turkey, for example, form on limestones. Or the WRB has developed a very unique name on soil classification, which is called the technosols. You go to Monaco and you see this intensity of infrastructure and housing. These are areas that are permanently covered by cement or urbanized. So they cover large areas as well in the Mediterranean. Unfortunately, at the best, they are expanding on where the best soils are. And just not to go too much into detail about that, we do have vertisols, as you see in Morocco. These are heavy clay soils, also difficult from the soil physical point of view, or sandy soil, arenasols, as you see in the area of Egypt, for example, between Cairo and Alexandria. That used to be called Desert Road, and now it's full of cultivation through irrigation systems. And then there is a large extension of the Sahara Desert. So harsh environments with limited potential for agriculture production. This is summarizing more or less of what I was mentioning. Now, we don't have the time to go country by country, but again, very distinctly speaking, you see in the MENA region the dry land expansion, almost double of what's happening in the northern Mediterranean countries. And this graph also shows linkages between the availability of land, irrigation, and dry lands. Again, the conditions in the MENA comparing with the Mediterranean part of Europe are much more difficult for production. So what that means that we have strong competing interest in the Mediterranean foreland. Some of these pictures here show, for example, these are taken here in Puglia, in Bari, where farmers grind even the natural pastures or the rocky areas for expanding cultivation. We have something like 20,000 hectares here in the province of Bari alone with the grapes. Olives also have been cultivated. So it's a strong interest from the agriculture point of view, but then there is the issue of selling and urbanization, which also require land. And if I have to describe where are much of the so-called technosols or soils that are permanently sealed, you can see that they go along the coast. And I did mention previously that much of the fertile land suitable for farming in the MENA is exactly there in the coast. So we are losing many of these areas. Well, this picture has been shown even by many speakers in the past, and it shows Europe by night. But you can notice there exactly what I was mentioning, the high pressure on the coast. We have something like 50 to 70% of the population living along the coast, and predictions actually show for 2050 that something like 50% of the Mediterranean coast would be cemented, again at the expense of the best soils. And if I take a very unique example, this is Malta, a very small country, 500,000 people, but there are 1.2 million tourists per year that come to Malta, and they require expansion of infrastructure and also water. Agriculture also along the coast has changing continuously. This is a picture of Andalusia in Spain in 56. You can see that there, near the coast there was a nature reserve, and on the other side there was mostly only, I should say, rain-fed farming. And then we went in 2004 by completely transforming the coast with infrastructure and went from rain-fed to irrigated agriculture with large requests for water and chemicals and issues that are related then to pollution and so on. And this is actually one of the reasons why Spain is one of the largest exporters of fresh fruits and vegetables. So, to summarize, also in regards to critical land degradation processes, I did mention silting. We have also issues of erosion, being that both water and wind, salinization, alkalinization, something like 10,000 hectares throughout the region. And there is the big issue also for soil organic matter and fertility decline, because if we take out the nutrients from the soil and do not replace them, we also diminish the fertility level and productivity level, but that is also related to carbon sequestration and climate change and so on. A few pictures showing erosion, which is also a natural process. It happened also before humans populated the earth, but the big issue in erosion is when it is accelerated due to unsustainable land management practices. So with our actions we increase the intensity of erosion, also with side effects like this reservoir sedimentation in Tunisia. That picture was taken about 5 to 6 years ago, and I'm not sure whether it is this or completely filled out now. We do have also nature disasters, and this was the earthquake that hit Italy, the region of Emilia-Romagna in May last year. And you see from the face of this farmer how desperate he is. This is one of the most productive areas in Italy and probably in Europe as well, and which is also under the big pressure also of selling and urbanization. And I should mention that this issue is not only for the MENA, it is also a critical issue in the EU countries. Let's move to the water nexus. The Mediterranean also is a region with high water scarcity, something like 60% of the water scarce population. Countries in the world with less than 1,000 cubic meters per person per year occurs here. And who is the biggest user of water? It is agriculture, which in the southern and eastern Mediterranean countries uses something like 82% of all available water. That figure goes to about 50% in the northern countries. 13% of water is used for domestic needs, including here the big pressure that coming from the tourism industry with something like 300 million visitors per year. And that picture speaks by themselves. So you can have pasta and you can have sauce, but if you don't have water to boil it, then you can have your lunch or dinner. And if you don't have the water, then you have to find it from somewhere else. So desalinization is one of these trends that is going on. 56% of the water needs in Malta, for example, come from that source, and similar figures also for Cyprus or Israel and so on. And then it's the big issue of food chain that can increase the use of the virtual water. So where is the water? It could be above or below the ground. If it is above, the big issues after the 50s until probably the 90s was building big dams for reservoirs. So this is the Atatürk Dam in Turkey on the Euphrates River. That was completed in 1990. It cost 1.2 billion US dollars to irrigate large areas in the GAP project. Thousands and thousands of hectares were put under irrigation, but that also produced electricity, but also with consequences also on the water that run also into the other countries and so on, and we probably will come back to that. And if you don't have any more water above, you have to look underground. That also has expanded anywhere in the Mediterranean, but the big issue is when it happens near the coast, there is the big risk that the seawater could merge with the fresh water, and then the water that is being pumped out is saline, and what we do practically increase salinity in the irrigated areas, and that process has happened almost everywhere. You can see also the countries that are mentioned there, and in Egypt, for example, about 1 million hectares have been saline areas due to poor quality irrigation water. And when you keep drilling continuously, it may happen that you dry up the rivers. This is the Kabul River in Syria, was plenty of water in 75, and it's almost a dead river in 2006. Certainly, it's not only because this is mostly originated from karstic sources, but also from the Euphrates, that river that flows into Turkey, and those dams probably have also influenced the water flows here and probably all the way to Iraq. I mention this also because it's important to mention that yes, irrigation has increased the welfare and increased productivity in the Mediterranean, but still 60% of the food needs come from rain-fed systems and livestock systems. So we have also to take care in an overall integrated approach, not only one component on the land and water management, but also both of them. Some pictures from the GAP project in Turkey. These are open channel irrigation that you can see, also the cultivation of cotton with all the consequences that it had. And my colleagues in University of Çukurova in Adana have a lot to say on that. And then in the issues of water use and efficiency of water use, technology advancements has progressed. We went to pressurized systems where water is being controlled, is provided to the crop where it needed. In the center of this slide, you can see the system called AquaCard. It was developed actually by engineer Nicola Ramadalena, the head of our Department of Land and Water here at our institute with his staff. And actually that works like a credit card that accounts exactly the amount of water that is being used by every farmer. Or the drip irrigation systems where you provide the water at the right moment and the right time to the crop when it needs. I can even continue going with supplemental irrigation systems and so on, but the time is limited, and I again invite all of you to read our white paper and log on that. Then come the issue of water losses. Unfortunately, something like 45% of the water is used by crops, and we have the rest being lost, being that during the distribution system or losses on farm and so on, so there is plenty to improve. There are big competing interests, as I mentioned, for land, also for water, and various sectors of the industry require water for their needs. But the big issue again is if we can manage to use better the water in agriculture and save something like 55% of the water demand by 2025, that will be a great achievement, because irrigate agriculture, it will require more water, and it has, as a matter of fact, also the potential for water saving. Then let's move on to the climate change nexus. It's a big issue. Climate change now is discussed by various levels. I was pleased actually to hear yesterday the inauguration talk of President Obama that he mentioned climate change will be also a priority for the U.S. and it is a priority for every country, I guess. Climate change has a lot of implications, starting from biodiversity, from scarcity on land and water resources and pressures on that, whether then this issue of sea level rise, and then all of that together certainly have a toll on food production and food security. I took this map developed by the IPCC, is the A1B scenario, and it's very clear where the changes, for example, in rainfall will occur. It's exactly in the Mediterranean. So many of the models agree at least in one thing, that the region will become drier and hotter. So the pressures on existing land and water resources would increase. Again, from the same scenario of the IPCC, you see that also temperature is predicted by the end of the century probably to increase by 5.1%. There is a recent report of the World Bank that for the Arab region that puts even at some 6 degrees Celsius increase. And the decrease in rainfall could range between, at the worst case scenario, 27 even to 30%. And I mentioned previously the issue of sea level rise. If 1 meter, only 1 meter would increase, Egypt will pay dire consequences. These are some World Bank estimates, and it shows that Egypt may lose 970 square kilometers in the Nile Delta. And I mentioned that Egypt has only 5% of the land fit for agriculture, and if it loses exactly there, then the situation becomes even worse. And predictions are that population increase in Egypt, it could be more than 100 million by 2020 and even more by 2050. But Italy could be affected as well, and many other countries especially on their coastal areas. So there are impacts on agro-food systems, expansion of desertification processes, which we are actually in an area which is affected badly by desertification, pressures on water stresses, biodiversity decline, and all of that is related with political and social disturbances, because when the conditions of living are difficult, then the trouble could come. What to do? There is no other way that at the end we have to adapt, and to adapt to this we have to develop at least some varieties that are tolerant to heat, to salinity, to drought. There is a lot of work being done on that direction. ICARDA is heavily involved in this, and there are good signals already for being new cultivars under development that will have to adapt to these adverse conditions that climate change would impose on us. Let's move to the biodiversity nexus. The Mediterranean is a sanctuary of the world biodiversity. As you can see, many hotspots in the region. Now 10% of the world's endemic plants are located in only 1.6% of the global world surface. I was reading a report from ICARDA actually in 2010. ICARDA provided to the Svalbard gene bank collection in Norway something like 63,000 germoplasm accessions, and many of them come from the Mediterranean. Actually, wheat started here, and many other crops. So it is very rich. It's very rich in biodiversity, and it has to be protected. That's a must. Now, to make the link between biodiversity and food security, I think the best way is to use the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment through the ecosystem functions and services. You see that, as are given in this slide, these are the provisioning, the supporting, the cultural services, and through the provisioning services that the ecosystem provide, you have also food production. So it's a very, very close link between the biodiversity conservation and services that are offered by the ecosystem and then food security. FAO has also developed the concept of agrobiodiversity, which include actually also the variety of animals, plants, and the microorganisms that are on Earth, and how they are important for producing food and supporting the agricultural development. Let's come to the last nexus. This is the energy. The MENA region especially, it is blessed, I should say, with enormous fossil fuel resources, and certainly they play a very crucial role on the economic development of the region, but also on the revenues that they generate, which are used otherwise for buying food. But slowly there is the need to go to more energy and smart food systems, and we have also to increase the efficiency in agro-food systems without lowering productivity. But luckily, the region is also blessed with solar and wind renewable energy sources that have to be used at the best of producing and increasing the sources of energy. I'll show you a picture of the Desert Tech project in North Africa. Many European companies are involved in this project, and the idea is to use the energy that is produced by the solar panels in the arid areas to generate electricity. But the problem is that we do not need to cut olives and to put solar panels where the best soils are, which those have to be protected for producing the food or maintaining the quality of the landscape. Some figures again, what are the future perspectives of renewable energy sources in MENA, and you see that there are several Mediterranean countries that have ambitious plans. Turkey, for example, pretends to have 30% of its renewable energy sources by 2030. Same figure, similar figures are also for Jordan and then Morocco and Egypt with high and great potentials for expanding and increasing the productivity of the renewable energy sources. So, coming almost to the end, one would mention then what is the future of food security for the MENA? I would say it's very uncertain as a rough conclusion. And no need to go back and to discuss the availability of land and water, which I already mentioned, and the toll that the climate change is already taking on it. Do need to recognize, though, as I previously mentioned, that there is revenues that are coming from oil and tourism industry that are used for buying food. It was mentioned also in the first webinar that many of the countries like Egypt, which is the largest cereal importer in the world, but the same figures range also for Algeria and for Morocco. So these countries use the revenues otherwise produced by their income to buy food. And that goes along with the new concept that has been somehow developed recently, that food security not necessarily mean self-sufficiency in food production. I mean, IFRI also agrees on that, and that probably is an effect of we live in a globalized world. So if Argentina has surpluses in food, they have to sell it somewhere. But that brings also to the issues of probably what is the toll of that and in climate change and so on. But it comes also to the issue of political and social stability in a country. And we had crisis in 2008 in Algeria, in Egypt, when prices went high and availability of food in the global markets was not at easy access for these countries, so trouble could happen. But let's face it also that there is the inefficient and equitable use of water that lies at many roots of the problems that we are facing in the region, including food security. I mentioned also the issues between rivers that flow from one country to another, or the big ground aquifer that is bordering Egypt and its neighbors. So there are plenty of topics to be discussed also in that. Then there is somehow to recognize that local, national and regional governance for sustainable management of nature resources is a priority, no matter where a Mediterranean country resides, north or south. And expectations are that probably the Union for the Mediterranean will also be more active on that and support a nature resources agenda that brings together all the countries in one line. I'm almost to the end, and I would like to show this graph that gives the population increase in the Mediterranean. By 2020, we will be more than 535 million people, and where is going to happen the largest increase? Is going to happen in the MENA countries. That will be more than 300 million people. I mentioned probably by 2050 Egypt will have more than 150 million people. And how that is translated then is translated with reduction of the availability of arable land per capita, which will go from 0.48 that was in the 60s, half of that, 0.21 almost by 2020, and we will lose if we keep sealing our soils at the present rates, and if we keep going with the same rates of land degradation and desertification, something like 8 million hectares of land will be lost by 2020. And I mentioned already that we are in a land scarce region. Is there hope? Yes, certainly it is. It is hope because we have to endorse sustainable nature resources management. There are plenty of work being done. We can grow halophytes on saline areas. This year is the International Year of Quinoa by the United Nations, or we can build terraces where I designed well, or harvest water, as is shown also in this picture in Tunisia. So I'm closing by mentioning that this picture speaks by itself. It is in the Canary Islands in Spain. The grapes that they grow are just without any kind of irrigation, and the walls protect them from wind erosion. So there is plenty of knowledge and information in the region that has to be better valorized, better distributed, and we have to merge between indigenous knowledge and modern science in order to meet the big challenge of food security. And thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Pandi Zdruli, for your very interesting presentation. The second speaker, Dr. Gaetano Ladisa, will give a speech on reforestation to fight land degradation in semi-arid regions, the Maltese case study. Some information about Dr. Gaetano. Dr. Gaetano Ladisa graduated in forest science at the University of Bari, Italy. In 1995, obtained a PhD in hydrology from the University of Padua in Italy. He is an expert in desertification risk assessment, specialized in soil degradation mitigation through implementation of afforestation actions, as team member of the National Forest Plan in Malta, implemented by the Mediterranean Economic Institute of Bari. Dr. Gaetano Ladisa has been involved in various research and cooperation projects on sustainable management of natural resources and water scarcity using innovative collaborative approach. Dr. Gaetano Ladisa, the floor is yours. Good luck.
Thank you, Laura. So, as Laura told before, I'm trying to show you a practical case study in which reforestation action will be implemented to fight land degradation and to mitigate soil erosion. The area of the project is Maltese Island. As you know, Malta is a small island, not more than 300 square kilometers in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea, characterized by a typical Mediterranean climate with hot and dry summer and mild and rainy winter. So the main problem linked to land degradation, as Professor Pandi told before, are linked to the unsustainable use of the land. More than 60% of the surface of the island is occupied by urban areas with a high level of soil sealing and consequently a high rate of runoff. The arable land occupy 40% of the island, and even in this case there is a mismanagement of the agricultural areas who lead to huge soil erosion and soil degradation linked to the use also of water coming from the underground that are brackish water. So this is resulting in salinization. There are also physical processes who lead to soil degradation, especially the rainfall regime with heavy rain during the winter and poor level of soil organic matter that made the soil prone to erosion. The low level of vegetation cover emphasized the effect of soil erosion and runoff. So the area in which the project Foresta 2000 was implemented is in the north of the island, in a very different kind of landscape characterized by hills and a valley with also with a wetland, as you can see in the picture. There are many problems linked to the different use of the area, agricultural. There are also abandoned field and clay slope affected by surface erosion. Foresta 2000 started in 2000 under the control of BirdLife and initially covered a surface of 18 hectares. At the end of the project, the whole area was extended to 100 hectares in 3 different stages. The first stage, the phase 1, enters the Marfa Ridge, an area occupied by clay slope and some terraced area, abandoned terraced area. There is a valley mainly occupied by agricultural activities and from one of the most important wetlands in Malta, the Hadira Nature Reserve, and there is also the hill, the Malia Ridge, occupied by a typical karst garrigue. So very different kind of landscape, and so need different kind of intervention. The main problem are linked to the human activity, mainly to the agricultural and especially to the abandonment of agriculture, and other linked to the leisure and recreational activity, off-roading, camping, and so on. Both of them lead to mismanagement of the soil, soil degradation, and vegetation depression will lead to soil loss and soil erosion. As you can see here in the Marfa Ridge, there are several terraced fields. Due to the poor income they provide and to the low level of soil organic matter, this kind of area was abandoned in the past years, and so the several line of rubber walls who retain soil for the cultivation was abandoned, and so fall and due to the lack of maintenance, and this lead to breaching of rubber wall and a huge amount of soil erosion and mass movement. On the other hand, the leisure and recreation activity lead to soil compaction and vegetation depletion, especially in the clay slope area. And so the situation at the beginning of 2002 is this, as you can see in the picture, with a huge amount of soil erosion and heavy surface process leading to rill and gully erosion. So the objective of the project is to preserve soil from erosion, restore habitat, improve agrobiodiversity, and recover the site for recreational, educational, and cultural purposes. The solution starts from the control of the access of the area and two different kind of activity: the rebuilding of rubber walls and the recreation of the vegetation cover in order to retain soil. These are some pictures related to the control of the access to the area. And the rubber wall restoration was applied to an area occupied by 15 kilometers of rubber walls. As you know, to recover rubber walls, we need to rebuild totally the rubber walls, and the rate of work is 2.5 meters per man per day. During the period between 2004 and 2006, 4 kilometers of rubber walls were totally rebuilt. As you can see, there are some pictures related to the rebuilding of rubber walls in the area. The next step is to improve habitat recreation and perform afforestation activities. We choose typical plants coming from belonging to the Mediterranean Maltese, with a especially focus on the shrubs. 60% of shrubs in respect to the 40% of small trees. In 5 years of the project, more than 100,000 saplings were planted, with a good success rate. 88% of plants survived the first year. In the meantime, seeds coming from indigenous plants were collected in order to reintroduce in the site. As you can see, there are some pictures related to the afforestation and habitat recreation. 8,000 of these plants coming from Italian nursery of the Corpo Forestale dello Stato, and the effect of reforestation activity are clearly explained in this picture. Two different stages in 2005, 2010. In two different places of the afforestation project. Unfortunately, in the previous afforestation project, some invasive alien species were introduced in the area. So we are obliged to remove in different way this kind of plant. For example, here you can see the mechanical uprooting of the Acacia cyanophila, a very invasive trees that colonize quickly the terraced area. The clay slope stabilization was a tricky activity due to the fact that, first of all, we need to retain soil on the slope, and then we can try to increase the soil, the vegetation cover. We create some counterbalance made of dry stone walls, able to retain soil and to reduce the slope, and then we plant on the back of this structure small cutting of plant able to colonize quickly the area and recover the vegetation on the slope. As you can see, the effect of the counterbalance and the different species we use to increase the vegetation cover. In very few years, the effects are very clear and visible. in 2005 this is the situation, and then in 2010 the vegetation cover was re-established, and as soon the vegetation cover and colonized the area, the structure became less visible, and so the impact of the structure decreased. For what about the general evolution of the area, this is the situation in 2002 at the very beginning of the project, and in 2006 this is the situation. Just to compare the effect of the rehabilitation of the slope in 2002 and 2010. We try also to improve agrobiodiversity using typical plant of the Mediterranean Maltese, able to produce berry, and so to give food, provide a source of food for wintering birds and mammals. And this is an overview of the different shrubs we use in the area. As I told before, we try also to replant and seed oak, a very exigent plant, a very exigent trees, especially in the more fertile place. And the meantime, we try to improve organic farming in the valley, pushing on the farmer to plant hedge and tree rows in order to improve ecological connectivity in the area, and these hedge are able to act as a wind shelter, reducing evapotranspiration and increasing the runoff infiltration. The use of local variety and vegetable is able also to provide an additional income for the farmer. Some more slides to conclude my speech. The lesson we can export in other countries. The lack of landscape and management lead to land degradation. Forestry and bioengineering intervention could help halting soil loss only if supported by structure able to ensure soil retention and stabilization. There is a need to implement small ecological infrastructure in order to ensure ecological connectivity between the different sites of intervention, and this kind of shelter act as a wind shelter, are able to mitigate the effect of extreme hydrological event due to the climate change. The use of a local edible plant can improve the dietary regime of the smallholder and also provide additional income for farmers, and no one of these activities could be performed without the participation and involvement of the stakeholder. And that's all. If you need more information about the project, you can visit the site BirdLife Malta. And so thank you for your attention, and I give the floor to Laura.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Gaetano Ladisa, for your very interesting presentation. Now the question time is open, and the speaker will answer to all your questions. Of course, since the time of this session is limited, the expert will be glad to answer further questions through Feeding Knowledge Facebook and Twitter official pages. Join us and follow our activities in Facebook and Twitter official pages. Professor Pandi, are you ready?
Okay.
Time?
Okay. Well, thank you, Laura, again. There was a question regarding the Atatürk Dome in Turkey and the effects that this one had on both Syrian and Iraqi agriculture sector. I said a few words in the beginning that yes, these are issues that have to be dealt between countries through agreement with them. It's not actually my job to point out also kind of political implications, but yes, if one country keep the largest part of the water, this is well documented actually by various publications. So the impacts are there. As a matter of fact, one of the my slides show the Kabul River in Syria, which is almost dry, and that is also affected by the Atatürk Dam. Is a question regarding the decision makers and how they see climate change. Well, some of the signals that I mentioned are quite positive, and I truly hope that they could make up their mind. I'm not a decision maker, I'm a scientist, but our job is to show them that we have a problem here and something has to be done. Then there was another question that was dealing with the issues of increased focus on food production through sustainable and sustained production and intensification, and how that could be linked especially to the southern and eastern Mediterranean countries with productivity. I mentioned this is an area with scarcity of land and water, and the Mediterranean cannot feed its own people with its own resources as far as land and water is concerned. But yes, I agree that we should pay more attention to unsustainable food consumption and patterns, but that was the subject of the first webinar that is still online on YouTube or on the web page of the Feeding Knowledge Project, so I will invite anyone to follow that discussion as far as diets and consumption patterns are concerned. There were also some questions regarding the insight into the sustainable nature resources management, sustainable food consumption and production nexus, and how to relate it to food and nutrition security. Well, we deal mostly in this topic with the nature resources management, and I think the analysis that I made as far as availability of land and water, the effects of climate change and also biodiversity loss, and also the linkages with energy and using more wisely energy, how that could address the productivity level. As far as food consumption patterns, these are changing dynamics, but again, the project has 5 priorities, and I'm sure if not from the previous webinar, you will hear also more in the upcoming webinars, which will deal also with the consumption patterns and nutrition. And the final question on the impact on food security of climate change is not only rainfall and temperature. Well, the rainfall and temperature have a very strong impact on crop growth and then on productivity. As we say, sometimes if the temperature increase for northern countries like Russia or Canada, maybe it's good for them, but in the Mediterranean it's bad news, because we put under more stress our crops. That's why we have to develop new varieties that can resist to heat, to drought, to salinity. Is work already going on that, and there are actually some encouraging results. I mentioned the case of quinoa, for example. We're experimenting that with our master students in last year in Morocco, this year in Egypt, and there are very, very promising results. So, which it's a crop with high protein. It resists well adverse differences in climate. So that could be one priority, as well as other crops. I think that is more.
Okay, there is a question for Dr. Gaetano, please.
Okay, Gaetano, the floor is yours.
Sorry
Thank
for
you.
this.
So, the question is, what is the feedback from the population? Okay, as I told during my speech, the project is a long-term project, and so the first action have a good feedback from population due to the fact that we try to recover a traditional landscape. And so this was very appreciated from the local resident and especially from tourists. due to the fact that there is the possibility to rehabilitate an area to the touristic and to educational activities. Moreover, the project have an action to push up other projects in the environmental field. So the Foresta 2000 project is one of the flagship in the plan, the national Maltese plan for the environmental and from the in the forestry sector. Moreover, there is also a good response from people, especially from the part of the population linked to the environmental activity. For example, just a few months ago, there was some vandalistic act in the area. More than 3,000 plants were cut from people. There is the possibility that these people come from the lobby of hunters who try to use this area as a place in which perform hunting activities. So immediately the response of the population lead several people in planting trees, and so in just 2 weekends more than 10,000 plants were replanted in the area. So I think that this is the good indicator, the best indicator for the success of a project. So if a project is able to lead, to move the public opinion in this way, maybe that during the implementation of the project, a link between activities and population was created. And so I think that this is one of the success of the project. So.
Okay. Let me briefly thank the two speakers of the webinar, Professor Pandi Zdruli and Dr. Gaetano Ladisa, and thank you all for attending this event. Before closing, we remind you that this webinar was just one of a series of periodical events devoted to food security. We really hope that you will retain the main spirit of our online conferences, in which we value collaboration and reciprocal exchange of ideas. Soon you will receive an update on feeding knowledge next activities. I invite you again to join us following our activities in Facebook and Twitter official pages, Feeding Knowledge official pages. The next webinar will be held on January 30th, and will be focused on quantitative and qualitative enhancement of crop growing products, featuring Dr. Tahir Yassin as keynote speaker, followed by speech of Dr. Alessandra Guicelli. And I hope to see you online soon. Good afternoon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.